Hi, I'm Canney with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. I'm here to discuss long grass, prairie in the parks, and pollinator plantings. Following the actions of the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Interior, in June of last year, Mayor Beitler issued a proclamation for National Pollinator Week. As part of the celebration, the Lincoln Parks Department hosted a kickoff event at Pioneer Woman, adding milkweed to the newly renovated garden, hosting more than 3,000 pollinator-friendly plants. Lynn Johnson, Parks and Recreation Director, has made it a priority to continue to take actions that reinforce the principles of best management practices and good stewardship by including messages in the Park and Recreation annual program guides and encouraging the public to visit the many sites scattered throughout the park system where efforts have been made to provide habitat for pollinators. While a great deal of attention has been given to the issue recently, the Parks Department has been making strides for many years, receiving recognition in 2015 by the Nebraska Environmental Trust, Nebraska Forest Service, and the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum for such efforts. Some of the ways that we've been making strides is through our Functional Landscapes program. One of the first approaches is reducing the mowing practices and creating long grass areas in our parks. Providing a vegetated buffer along stream, water, and lake edges. Reducing the amount of chemical applications, both herbicides and pesticides, in park landscapes. Many people didn't know dandelions provide an early and easily available food source for pollinators. Creating functional landscapes with rain gardens and bioswales. Here's an example of a rain garden with goldenrod, aster, and switchgrass. Integration of native plants into all landscape projects, especially signature or landmark spaces. Featured here is Centennial Mall and a sculpture of Chief Standing Bear surrounded by native plants that were used by the Ponca. The conversion of long grass areas into prairie in the parks. Typically, the blend includes a mix of little bluestem, side oats, and many others. Featured here is Taylor Park. Diversification of street tree list. Currently, there are more than 100 different varieties of trees on the street tree list. Oaks are one of the trees that provide habitat to as many as 557 caterpillar species. The installation of pollinator gardens into both new and existing parks. By locating pollinator gardens near trails, it helps the public become familiar with many of the plants, like wild quinine featured here. Passive areas in new parks are seeded to a native mix rather than traditional fescue, creating prairie in the park. By incorporating wildflowers into the new parks, it allows the public, again, to get comfortable with that aesthetic. Milkweed has been incorporated into seed mixes. Milkweed serves as the only food source for monarchs. The implementation of these projects relies on a number of resources, including private and public partnership, parks and recreation staff, and of course, volunteers. In May of 2017, we worked on a project called Pioneer Woman. This planting event incorporated the use of more than 3,000 native and native adapted perennials into a sensory garden featured around the historic statue by Ellis Berman. More than 60 volunteers participated in this event, including staff from Arbor Day Foundation, Parks and Rec, the Country Club Neighborhood Association, and the Women's Club of Lincoln. More than 40 varieties of native and native adapted perennials, grasses, and forbs were used to create this sensory garden. Here's an image of Pioneer Woman once restored, the arbor installed, and the sensory garden with the focus on pollinators completed. Some helpful design tips for working on projects like these include the planting in multiples. Here's an example of purple gayfeather, swamp milkweed woven together at Union Plaza. By adding native plants into our more traditional landscapes, here's an example of incorporating swamp milkweed into hydrangea, boxwood, and spruce. Creating a stylized prairie by using swaths of plant material like bluestem, sorbaria, and bee balm can both be aesthetically pleasing and functional. And keeping in mind four-season interest. Here along the airport corridor is featured allium in the spring, black-eyed Susan in the summer, Amsonia in the fall, and little bluestem in the winter. Lessons learned from projects like these include patience is rewarded. Starting with a small plug can create a complete landscape in approximately 3 years. A landscape is always going to be changing. Plants will move, shift, and reseed, creating movement in the garden. Here's an example from the rotary strolling garden. And sharing is caring. There are more than 1.4 billion insects per person on this planet, and we need almost every one of them. Monarchs and swallowtails are among the many caterpillars that create holes in the leaves of the plants in our gardens. Places in which you can find examples of these plantings are scattered throughout the park's system. Featured here is the rotary strolling garden with gayfeather, coneflower, goldenrod, and asters in the fall. Featured here is Union Plaza with baptisia in the spring in full bloom, followed by the prairie band in the summer with coneflower, and bee balm and sorbaria. While not native, rattlesnake master is a plant that provides all kinds of benefits to pollinators. It is a U.S. native, but not a Nebraska native. And in the fall, Union Plaza is lit up with the asters of radon's favorite. The airport entryway is another example that incorporates the use of more than 50 varieties of native plants and grasses. We continue to make strides with pollinator projects in parks, and here's a list for 2018. For more information, please contact me at Lincoln Parks and Recreation or visit our website.